So welcome everyone. Today is the second session of our event on developing an innovation mindset in food systems. Those of you who joined us last week were introduced to some key insights and concepts from neuroscience. And today's session, and Ben will explain more in a few seconds, will be more about introducing you to some practical tools and techniques. The session will be also 2 hours. We are recording it just for the needs of this event. You will receive the recording afterwards. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Alexandra Atalla, and I'm a program and knowledge management analyst working with the food and agricultural commodity systems community, joining from Portugal. So without taking more time, I'm handing over to Ben. And also for those of you who haven't met Ben, Ben is the founder of the Brain Innovation Project.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone you're in, and welcome to this session. Before I before I just go through what we're going to talk about, I just want to Thomas Edison was sort of like the innovator's innovator. He actually he was very good friends with Henry Ford, and just as Henry Ford was developing the production line with the production of of Ford cars, Edison was the first person who really systemized research and development. I mean, he was literally invented the R&D department, and he was very good friends with Henry Ford, and they actually shared a winter estate in Florida. So very close indeed. And Edison, I think he had over 1,000 patents and stuff. I mean, it's quite incredible, including light bulb, gramophone, all sorts of things. And he said innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So if you're looking to enjoy yourself and be inspired, then we're going to be working hard. It's 99% perspiration that we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. This was a statue of Edison in the Edison Ford Winter estate. And if you look at this, what has he got in his hand? And you can see a walking stick here, but what in his other hand? Any guesses? Just shout it out if you want. Okay,
light bulb.
Huh?
Light bulb.
You would think so, wouldn't you? I mean, that's the point. He has a ball, a metal ball. You'd think it would be a light bulb. Now, why he has a metal ball in his hand, it goes to show that actually, as well as being one of the greatest inventors of all time, Edison was also great at inventing his reputation. Right? And this is all about the inspiration part of Edison. And we're going to come back to that at the end. Okay, so we'll come back to this. Okay, metal ball. Don't forget that. But before we move on, I'm just going to hand over to Alex, who's going to ask you a question on the trusted Mentimeter to just about last week.
Thank you, Ben. So Camila will share the instructions in the chat box, how to join our Menti poll. And we have one question for those of you who joined us last week. So what is something that you remember from last week's session? We realize that many things have happened between the session last week and this week. So yeah, you can take a bit of time to think about your answers. And there are some that are coming in. So the prediction error, uncertainty, we're all creative. We don't believe what we see what we believe. The brain tends to be stubborn, tends to avoid uncertainty. We think with our body. So let's wait one more second in case anyone would like to share more insights. I think that's it, Ben.
Okay,
Over to you.
that's good. We don't believe what we see what we believe. The brain tends to be stubborn, tends to avoid uncertainty. Uncertainty, yeah, we're all creative. We think with our body. And today, all of this is good stuff. And today, we're going to explore some practical tools and techniques and ways of thinking that we can leverage some of this stuff for our innovation. Okay. And we're going to go fairly quickly because there's a lot to get through. And as usual, please, 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 we're all among friends here. Just if you have anything to say, just shout out. Don't be shy. You don't need to put your hands up or whatever. Just interrupt me. I won't be offended. Okay. Just as we get going, just briefly, just a couple of key points just to remember from last week. What we're not talking about is particular innovation approaches like design thinking, or we're not talking about sectoral approaches within food. We're talking here about innovation as a mindset, your brain. Right? That's what we're talking about here. As was mentioned, this is very much based on predictive processing and free energy principle, the work of Carl Friston, who some of you may be are familiar with. That essentially what it's saying is people mention that the brain is stubborn, but it's saying that the brain works on models of the world. And what we experience is our models of the world, and it's always comparing our models against the world with the data that we're getting in through the world. And when there's a mismatch, we get a prediction error. There's an error between the predictions of our model of the world and what we're experiencing of the world. And what this is saying is that the basic fundamental principle is that brains operate to minimize their uncertainty or surprise. Right? It's not that they're looking for accuracy, they're looking for minimizing the surprise. That's the driver. And there's two ways of doing this. This is just a brief recap on the key points. There's the change the model, updating or learning, or change the world to fit your model. In other words, act. But it's this uncertainty that is, here's the real paradox, is that our brains are seeking to minimize the uncertainty or surprise, and that really just means information gap. Right? They're trying to minimize the uncertainty or surprise, but it's precisely in this uncertainty and surprise where the possibilities for learning or action occur. Without the surprise, there's no possibility for anything. And the basic paradigm we're using is the exploitative, the explorative. When you're thinking about when you're trying to solve an issue, do you stick with what you know, or do you explore what you don't know? And of course, these are extremes, and it's both. But that's the basic paradigm which we're working on. Okay. And here, just one last thing in terms of the summary from last week. Uncertainty, it has obviously a negative context. People don't like uncertainty, generally, right? But it very much a situation, it depends on your state, your internal state, as to how you're viewing the situation to an extraordinarily large degree. So uncertainty, if the uncertainty is making you fearful or worried, or you're feeling threatened, right, then you're going to be defensive and stressful. But uncertainty can also be something which is exciting, and anticipation and curiosity and exploring. So you're exploring that type of uncertainty, right? When you've got an open and flexible worldview. Okay, so it's not the situation so much as the way we're perceiving the situation. This is just a brief recap on last week, all right? And one thing that just as we get onto, and the first way of thinking, and this is a mix of both, there are some practical exercises, but also ways of thinking, right? Which we're going to be exploring today. And the first thing is unleashing your natural genius. I mean, who doesn't want that? Put your hands up if you don't want your natural genius to be unleashed. Of course we do. We all like to think we've got natural geniuses. However, let's see how much of a genius you really are. Do you remember this from school? These kind of things, you know, you'd have to normally, I remember at school that you'd have a cannon, and there would be, you'd show a cannonball being fired at different angles and velocities, and you'd have to calculate where the cannonball landed. Yeah, we all probably had something similar to that. Anybody good at maths? Anybody who could still do that? No, from one person, no. I remember, Eda, though you gave yourself or everybody else a 2 on your creativity. So last week, anybody? No. Well, imagine you had this diagram, and it was of a ball, right? Of a ball being thrown. You might not be able to calculate it in terms of the maths as to where it's going, but you can do something else. Through, I don't know how you do it, but somehow you can move flesh and blood towards the ball, put your hands out, maybe even adjust for wind speed, and catch the ball. All right, you might not be able to calculate it, that kind of thing. Any old computer program can do that. You can do something much more impressive. Well, which is more impressive, being able to do the maths or actually being able to move flesh and blood and catch the ball just through thinking? Which do you think? Catching it. I mean, billions of times more impressive, right? I mean, not just a little bit more impressive. I mean, if you've seen even the most high-tech robots at the moment, I mean, they're not very impressive in their movements. You could, but you don't know how you actually move. You don't know how you do that. You don't know how you can actually act like a real life physicist in real time, right? You don't know how you do that, but you can do it just through somehow thinking about it. That's genius. What else can you do that you don't really have access to and you don't really know how you do it? You can remember to breathe every couple of seconds. You move your eyes about 4 or 5 times, or blinking, but you also move your eyes 4 or 5 times a second, eye saccades. You can produce new red blood cells. Do you know how you do that? Do any of you know how you do that? Probably not, but you can do it. You can extract food from, you can extract energy from food in your stomach, and it gets converted somehow into thoughts. You can dream at night. Do you know how you dream at night? You can make associations between very different ideas. But do you know how you do it? Not really, huh? You, we tend to think of ourselves in terms of our creativity or our innovation as in very, 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 very narrow ways, right? Or even our identity. Right, I see Kieran here in terms of your, I just see your, I'm not picking on you, I just see your screen here. Yeah, Kieran, you've got a name, right? I don't know where you live or who you are, but you've got an identity, right? If you've got family or not, but you've got identity. But way beyond that identity, way beyond this tiny, tiny, tiny sense of identity, you're a living organism. Right? A biological living organism who can do the most incredible things that you actually have no idea how to do, how you do it. Right? And we put so much emphasis on this smaller part of us, whereas we're really living organisms who can do phenomenal things. Right? And so in this today, when we go through exercises, I'm going to refer to you. But when I say you, I'm meaning you, the living organism. Everything contained within your skin, right? Some people want to make distinctions between mind and body, or brain and body, and all of this stuff, or find their true selves, or their true creative selves, or whatever. Good luck finding your true self, all right? I'm going to encourage you to think about, it's all one thing, living organism, extraordinarily complex, extraordinarily brilliant, all contained within the boundaries of your skin. Right? There's some kind of barrier, or you can see it as connector to the outside world. So that's the first thing. And I'd really encourage you, not just in this session, but even throughout life, to start thinking of yourself as a lot more than just your identity, right? This extraordinarily narrow identity which you give yourself. We are part of 4 billion years of the evolution of life, right? And we have a single celled ancestor 4 billion years ago, Luca, last universal common ancestor. 4 billion years of life, all of these processes. And if you narrow your innovation to just your technical expertise or your professional expertise, you're cutting off the genius of life, right, of nature. So I'm going to refer to you as to you, the living organism. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that? I mean, obvious? Is this how you think about yourself already?
It's kind of related, but it's reminded me of I can't remember what it's called, but you'd look at, say, like a pen, and you'd go down through like, well, the pen's in my hand, but how did the pen get in my hand? And it's like, well, the plastic was made somewhere, it was sold somewhere, and it probably went through all these different this whole chain, supply chain of how to get there. And it was kind of reminding me about, that, but in terms of as you said, 4 billion years.
4 billion years. It's amazing, huh? Right? And we get so wrapped up in stuff. And if you hold your hand out like this, and this is the beginning of life on Earth, and this is today, what is it? Wednesday, Thursday, the 27th of March, 2025. If you just give yourself a nail file, you take a nail file, just cut the end of your finger off, humans have gone. All right? We're that recent. Right? Today, or in our lifetimes, is nothing. And we're building on all of this history, and we see stuff as so immediate and task driven, whereas we've got this massive, massive, massive history. It's all nature, right, of life behind us. And I think personally, I mean, it gives us a big spring in our step when we massively expand our view as to who we are as well. Moving on. So that's actually the first thing. It might not seem like a tool or a technique, but it's a way of thinking about innovation. It's about moving way beyond just our professional skills, as important as our professional skills are. It's about opening up in new ways. Now, the key thing is in innovation is you've got the old and the same, and the new and the different. Right? And by definition, the innovation, for good or bad, is new and different. Right? Old and the same is by definition not innovation. And we talked about, in a sense, old and the same is our mental model, or is our model. Whereas the new and different is the stuff which isn't already in our model. Right? In other words, what we're saying is we need the prediction error, the uncertainty, to be able to explore the new and different. In other words, what we put our attention on, because it's where we put our attention is going to determine whether or not we're noticing new things which are creating the errors and the uncertainty which allow us to learn or act in new ways. Right? If we're just putting our attention on stuff we already know, there's no learning or possibility for new actions. Right? So where we put our attention is critical in terms of creating that kind of uncertainty which allows us to learn. How do we do that? Sounds great. Wow, yeah, all right. Who would disagree with that? Right? But there's somebody who I'd like to just draw your attention to, who's come up with about the most simple method you can possibly use. And I think her work is astonishing. I don't know if any of you've heard of her, Ellen Langer, she was the first tenured professor of psychology at female tenured professor of psychology at Harvard. She's not uncontroversial, right? I should I should say that but she's written a lot about her big work was mindfulness. It was written in the 70s, and she takes a very she takes a non-spiritual, non-meditation approach to mindfulness. It was before, in a sense, it was before mindfulness meditation became popular in the West. She takes a much more a different approach to it. She's written amazing work, and for particularly of those of you who are aging, such as me, she's written a lot of stuff about about health, all right, and about changes and noticing changes. So her whole thing is about noticing change, noticing what you don't know rather than what you do know. She's like, the world, everything is always changing. And what we need to be able to do is to notice what's new and different. Right? And the point is it's not what we notice which is new and different, but she's more in terms of creating a brain state, right, where our brains are looking for what's new and different, right? And it doesn't matter what, but just the act of putting your brain in a state of I'm looking for what I don't know rather than what I do know takes you off autopilot, right? And once you're off autopilot, then things, options open up. Practically, what does this mean? We can do a little exercise here. Very easy. I guess most of you are in a room where you are there quite often, right? Maybe at home or in the office, somewhere where you're quite familiar. So you probably know the room quite well, right? Yeah, you know your room quite well. Think you know everything about the room, or most things. I would like you to look around your room and just notice stuff that you've never noticed before. Doesn't have to be important, right? It's not about, some intellectual thing. It might just be a line on the ceiling or the color of a picture or the angle of a picture or two books which are next to each other that you hadn't realized. Just look around. Doesn't matter what. Did anybody notice anything?
I noticed a vent.
You noticed what?
A vent.
Event.
Yeah, just in the office.
But you could probably you could carry on noticing other things. You can even look at the back of your hand. Look at the back of your hand. Notice, and you just look at, seriously, put your hand out and look at the back of your hand. Try it and notice things that you've never noticed about the back of your hand. You've probably seen thousands and thousands of times. What you're doing here is you're telling your brain, right? You're telling your brain it's not business as usual, right? You're telling your brain, no, this is not autopilot. You're telling your brain, okay, the world has lots of new information that I'm not aware of, and I need to be looking for new information. All right, it's not about what you're focusing on. It's the act of looking for new information about the world. In other words, moving from your model to, the world has lots of information out there, which I don't know, right? And once you put yourself into that state, it really changes everything, right? So, for example, who of you have somebody in your life, I don't know, work or profession, personally or professionally, where you seem to have the same conversation every time, right? And the outcome's kind of the same, right? Look, most families have that. I've got 3 kids, so I kind of Been there, right? You have the same conversation. Everybody just plays the same role, right? And it goes around again and again and again. And you might have this at work, right? Does anybody have that? Of course, we all do. When you go into these automatic roles or these automatic conversations, your brain is not looking for new information, right? It's not. It's just on autopilot. It has its expectations and what will happen. There's no prediction errors here. There's no uncertainty, right? That both sides are just playing their roles and carrying on. And yet, of course, each conversation is different to the one before. The person has changed. You've changed. You're not the same person as you were the day before, even if you had the same conversation. And so practically, what you can do is, even before going into that kind of conversation, spend 2 or 3 minutes just looking for what's new and different in the world. It doesn't matter what, and go into that conversation, and your brain will automatically be looking for new information rather than just repeating its automatic pilot. Or when you're having a conversation with somebody, and it seems to be going around in circles, look for what you don't know in the conversation, right? Look for what the new information, what's new and different about the conversation, rather than what you already know. Because by putting your brain where it's actively creating uncertainty about the world, that then provides the opportunity to learn. Kieran, I'll come to you in just 1 second. And you can also do this exercise. Try it when you walk home tonight, or maybe you're already home, and you walk down the same path or same road 1,000 times, right? You can already notice all these different things just in the room you are. Imagine all the different things you can notice just on walking down the street, which you've never really noticed. And if you talk to any artist or author, and they say, what's the secret to your work? What will they say? Not about, oh, I can draw nice lines or I can write nice words. They'll say it's observation, right? I'm looking at the world. I'm noticing things that other people don't notice. And that's the heart of innovation, right? When you're noticing stuff, yeah, and then it gives you the opportunities for new things. Kieran, please. Yeah.
No, it's funny because I was only talking to my family there over the last week about how exactly what you were saying there about walking down the same streets over and over again, and just for whatever reason you just actually look at a house that you've walked by 100,000 times, and you actually go, oh, I've never noticed that about this house, or you notice that there's something slightly different, or again, it's just funny because I've literally been going through it there the last week, so.
And what a beautiful way of living, huh? I mean, as well as a practical exercise, right? In terms of, you can do that before you have a conversation. As you say, I mean, the world is full of, you can stare at a leaf and notice stuff which you've never noticed, right? And, it's a way of looking at experience, huh? And you're totally right. Somebody else has their hand up. Philippe.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the, I guess, neuroplasticity of that. Like, if you start, with intention, trying to notice things that your brain is kind of wired not to notice, will it become easier over time? Just a very concrete
yeah.
example. I noticed that, as I grew older, the sense that I really lost is smell. Like, I used to smell many things and now I don't. And actually, it's kind of funny because I ordered these, you don't see them, these essential oils
Okay.
to try and bring new odors and see if I can, in a way, bring back smell in my life. So I'm just curious to know, is that something
That's
that
very
works for
interesting.
different?
It's very interesting, and actually, in smell is the one sense which is different to the others. right? Because smell actually goes directly to your brain, right? The molecules literally go in through your nose, whereas you know the molecules don't go into your eyes and sort of like into your visual system. So and smell is more than the other senses, is probably is actually more attached to emotion than the most of the other things. You know, like it's, you know, how you're walking down the street and you smell something and all of a sudden you're remembering dinner at grandma's 30 years ago or whatever. All right. Um, so yeah, you would you're I don't know why you would have your sense of smell would have changed, but yeah, I mean, I think that that a basic thing, yeah, you would have to put effort into identifying new smells and teaching your brain that this is important, right? And actually saying, you know, you're going up to a rose or whatever, and so smelling a rose, and actually saying to yourself, I know it sounds weird, right? I am smelling a rose. All right, and you're starting to integrate these different approaches. But this is, sorry, it's only a very quick kind of response. But yeah, it's I don't know quite. It would depend on why your smell had changed.
If I could,
But paying attention to it is going to be key.
if I could give you a recommendation, Philip, there's a movie and a book called Perfume, and when I watched and like read that, it was like my sense of smell came alive. It was like it's all about the film and how this guy has an extremely sensitive sense of smell, and it ends up like the story's all around how he's a bit mad, but I just really started to appreciate smells after it.
Thanks, I
Yeah.
appreciate. Yeah, I've heard of it, but never actually read or watched it. So I'll put it on my list for sure.
Well
Appreciate.
worth it.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you research it, I'm sure there's stuff written on it as well as to how we process it literally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that was interesting. Just to jump in there, the latest episode of the podcast by Sam Harris, his wife was introducing examples of how you not only can we enhance our existing sensorial capacities, you can learn the senses that humans don't normally have. Like literally, there are cases where a group of people were trained to detect the Earth's electromagnetic field. Um, but yeah, so samharris.org, just in case you want to go deeper into that, it's
Right,
fascinating.
right. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more going on out there than we're aware of. Okay. Um, in terms of just so, and the other thing as well is if you just very briefly, as well as observing things, if you find you're having a conversation, it seems to be going around in circles. Another thing you can do is you can just to bring yourself more into that present moment, because one of the reasons that Ellen Langer did her work was that she was you know, everybody was talking about, you've got to be in the moment, you've got to be present, and people were like, yeah, sounds great, but how the hell do you do it? Right? I mean, what does that mean? What, we have to go to a monastery for 20 years to, and she was like, no, 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 no. It's like, you know, by noticing what's new and different, you are already doing that, right? That's what this is. And another way you can do it, very simple, is you're having a conversation with somebody, just press your foot on the ground, right? And you'll bring in a new sensation to the conversation. You'll be bringing in something new to it, right? It will make you more present in this way. I'm gonna move on if that's okay. But this is both a very concrete tool that you can use, right? But it's also a kind of a way of life, right? It's from the whole way of looking at it. Moving on from Ellen Langer, blue sky thinking, right? Maybe most of you are familiar with this, the idea of just a sky, you know, sky is the limit. You can think about anything. It's more interesting than that in terms of innovation. A pigeon. I guess you've all seen a pigeon or a bird like eating food on the floor, right? On it's pecking at corn or whatever. It pecks at corn, and then what does it do? And yesterday, when I was doing this, I actually literally had a pigeon on my balcony and on my apartment was doing exactly this, right? So I was testing whether it was true. What else does it do? If you watch it, what it will do, it will tend to go like this, and then it stops and looks around, right? Why does it look around?
For potential threats.
Yeah, right. It's like it's a bad world out there, or it's a dangerous world out there. And so if you think about it, it's like it needs to be task oriented, right? It's eating the corn, but we might be writing an email. It's focused, right? But it also needs to be aware of its broader context, right? And these are two different things. And all living organisms have this ability, right? I mean, trees even, you know, they will suck up water or from the roots, but they'll also be aware of the seasons and changing temperatures. Bigger picture, more narrow stuff. And this person, Ian McGilchrist, has written extensively about this. And most of you have probably heard about the left and the right-hand side of the brain, right? That the left-hand side of the brain is supposed to be analytical and whatever, and the right side creative. People are familiar with this? It's kind of not really true, right? I mean, as with many of these popularized things, what he has written extensively, I mean, like really a lot, is it's actually that the left side is task oriented and the right side was more context oriented, which is slightly similar to analytical and creative, right? And what he's saying is that this is one of actually the big problems of humanity is that we've become so much task oriented and focused on the pecking at the grain that we're no longer looking at the context, right? And you can see this in the brain, for example. On the left-hand side, there's with your speech area. On the right-hand side, and it's crazy. Anybody familiar with this? That on the right-hand side, exactly the same, the mirror area, it's to do with gestures and tone of voice. Right? The mirror, it's like, you know, the sound and the context, the tone of voice, the thing. Same with understanding, right? And so there's this very important concept of narrow, task-oriented, focused, and broad, right? And we have to have both. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but we're often not very good at moving between the two, right? And a basic thing is, you know, within the neuroscience literature is this difference between spotlight consciousness, in other words, when you're focused on a specific task, and lantern consciousness, where you're much more aware of the context and the surrounding. Right? Have people heard of this spotlight and lantern? Right? Young children tend to have this much more, right? And this is to do with your brain plasticity, right? It's sort of like it becomes much more narrow with experience, right? Because we learn what works and what doesn't, and so therefore we get rid of the unnecessary connections. So lantern v spotlight. This obviously This is more spotlight, and this is more lantern, right? You see this again, convergent, divergent thinking, right? This is more spotlight, task-oriented, focused, determined by our immediate needs, narrow, divergent, big picture, strategic, context. Right? They're literally different ways that our brains will work. They're not just figuratively different, right? And this then gets on to, as you can see, there's a pattern coming here. Think about it, conversion, right? This is about exploiting what you already know, the tasks, right? Whereas the context, looking, exploring the context as a whole, is the explorative. And in innovation, you need both, right? You can't just go off into a dreamland. You need to make decisions. You need to actually make choices. But we're talking more about the explorative, the bigger picture stuff, right? So you've got this notion of, this, the bird is picking the corn, but we might be writing an email or making a phone call, or I don't know, looking at our phone or whatever. That's task oriented, and the other stuff is much more broader. How do you do this? What does this mean in practice? Right? Well, a lot of it is really to do with our eyes. Right? It really is that physical. But before we go on to an exercise for this, does anybody have any questions? Does this make sense even? Or you're like, what is this about? Right? It's important, this distinction, right? It's again, I want to emphasize again and again and again. It's not saying one is better than the other. You need to be able to be big picture and practical, right? It's just that when you are able to be both and you're able to switch between the two, that's when you can start to really come up with new ways of doing things. When you're aware of, oh, am I this or am I being this? Right? It's that awareness of it which is critical. And
Sorry, Ben.
Sorry, don't you say something?
Oh, I had a question, but I'll wait till you finish your thoughts first.
No, you can say this if you want, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how we can sustain or build maybe an organizational culture that actively encourage what you just said. And as I was pondering that thought, a thought came to mind, a technique, arts-based methods, and in my mind, it relates to the example you mentioned earlier about this, our body being this event that has been 4.6 billion years in the making, and the art-based method that I was exposed to was, it takes me through visualizing an imaginary journey of the place I was working in the context of food sustainability. And when we started to formulate our actions, we were actually prescribed the roles of rivers or extinct animals. And I know it just gives off such different vibes as to how to what prompts creativity. And of course, different people are resistant to that, but different, like people like me, hippie, like I fully embrace that. And just maybe you could speak to that, because I'm really exploring different ways how we can do this collectively.
Well, yeah, it's where to start. I mean, this is a big thing. I mean, one of the things about, in terms of organizational culture, I mean, we're here together trying to explore these ideas, right? So this is one of the things is when you introduce and have these kind of discussions, then I learn whenever I do this, right? I mean, even though I've done it many times before, I also get new things every time I'm doing it. So I see it as learning together. My personal take, right, but this is a very personal opinion, right, is that we have all these creativity approaches which work with imagine your rivers or whatever. I come at it very much from a biology, nature point of view, right? That we really are living organisms, right? And until we kind of accept this, then we can do all the creativity exercises we want, but it kind of is like a little bit of magic without understanding what's really going on. It's like just, okay, let's do some creativity and we can imagine things and we'll get these new insights. And that's really important, right? I'm not dismissing that. But for me personally, where I'm coming from, none of that really makes any sense except outside of our biology, that we are living organisms. We are part of nature, right? And when you're talking about food systems, right, and agriculture, I think this is a very powerful message as well, that we are, you know, like it or not, we are made of 99.99, well, probably 100% the same chemicals as the tree I'm looking at in front of me. Right? I mean, it's just, it's, and so we have to put it in this context of life. So not just using creativity as a tool, but it's actually a way of thinking about ourselves. Right? And we've become so analytical on stuff, which is good, and task-based and skill-based. All of that is good, that we've lost the fact that we're actually like biological living organisms. Right? How we do this in terms of organizational culture, I think one of the key things is training. I mean, we've got or these kind of conversations. This is really superficial, this conversation, right? In the sense of we could easily be spending a week together in this room, right? A week together in a room, right? Talking about stuff and actually going into it. This is the surface level of this stuff, right? And I think to bring about real change, you have to invest the time. Right? You know, it can't just come in a short time. But I'm going to move on a bit. Just one thing, if it's possible. I probably didn't answer your question very well, but I can't hear.
You did. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, good. So in terms of this narrow v broad, we are, Felipe, you'll be glad to hear we're mainly visual creatures, not smell. Well, that's not true. Visual systems are the things which have been most researched in humans, all right? But we are pretty good in the animal kingdom in terms of our vision, right? We are right up there. And our eyes are incredibly important. And what I would like you to do is, I hope most of you have got you've got a window near you. I can see some people have got windows. Have you got windows near you? I would like you to look out of your window at the sky. Right? At the sky, really at the sky, and don't move around looking like that, but fix a point on the horizon a long way away and just stare at it. Actually do it. Stare at the horizon, not at a tree or something in front of it. Really stare at the horizon. And just notice that as you do that, you can't really think about a task or be task oriented. Try and worry about something while staring at that sky. Go and really try and do that. Stare at the sky and try to worry about something or think about some task or some detailed thing. And you'll probably find yourself, as you stare at the sky, you'll probably find yourself relaxing. All right? You just go into that calm thing. And it's such a simple thing. Right? It's such a simple thing. But if there was one recommendation I have is that for the next week, spend 3 minutes a day just staring at the sky. Right? And you already start getting into your perspective is going out there away from here. It's such a simple thing. all right? And it will just put you into this more relaxed frame of mind and open frame of mind. And many people, they struggle. You've got an email, and then there's another meeting, and you've got one meeting, and then 3 minutes later there's another meeting, and then you got to do this, and you don't get to stop, right? And you can't, and it's very difficult to switch from one task to the other without bringing the previous task with you. Look at the sky for 2 minutes, and it will take you out of that more immediate task-oriented way of thinking, and it literally expands your horizon. Yeah, it's a very simple thing to do, and it will also it will just, as well as actually relaxing your nervous system, it will, and particularly when we're all on Zoom like this, Zoom is crap for creativity. It's really awful for this, because when we're in Zoom, we're in that narrow thing, right? It's not conducive to this. And you'll see many people, there are some people that when you're talking to them on Zoom, when you ask them a question, they go like this. Watch people. You'll see there are some people who do this. They kind of move away. They're literally, they're going into search mode. Right? They're moving from this and they're going into search mode. Whereas when you're just like this, we're in a sense, we're just repeating things that we already know. It's not very good for creativity here. And so this is just about expanding our horizons here. Before we take a break, I would just like to do another thing on perspective. Right? It's a similar kind of thing. And you can also, this is actually called peripheral vision. Right? When you're looking at the sky, you're putting yourself into peripheral vision. You can also do this just by putting your hands out like this and becoming aware while looking straight ahead, just becoming aware as to what's here at the sides. Because our eyes have very, very, very narrow details, right, in terms of what they can focus on. And you can test this out. If you're walking down the street and there's a car coming, you'll notice that there's a car before you can see which color it is. Right? If there's a car coming towards you, you try this. It's quite surprising. And you see the car, and it's only at a certain angle that you'll see what color it is. Because we're very, our focus is really quite narrow in terms of the detail. So when you're aware of what's around you, you can see that's a bit like the pigeon. But I want to do one little exercise before we go for a break, if that's okay. Again, related to perspectives. And I keep on coming back to the fact that so much of the things that we think of as mental processes have very strong biological ancestors. I'll put it that way. They're not the same thing, but they have correlates or background in our biology, us as living people, as organisms. So when we think about changing perspectives, we think of that as quite an intellectual thing, seeing different points of view, right? Yeah. It's also quite a fundamental biological thing, like with the pigeon. I would like you in this exercise to imagine that this is a 2D thing, but imagine it's turned around and you're sort of like looking at it from here. Okay? You're looking at this screen from here. So this thing in front of you, but because if it was turned around, it would just be a line, if you see what I mean. So imagine you're looking at this thing from here. Okay? Imagine you're looking at it from there. You can notice how you feel as well when you do this. Just be aware of how it makes you feel when you look at it from different ways, angles. Look at it from there. Now look at it from there. And look at it from here. Now Now look at it from here. Oh, and now from here. From there. From there. Looking at it from there, from top down. Now looking at it from there. From there. And looking at it down. Looking at it from here. From there. From there. Okay. What happens? How does it make you feel when you do that, when you look at it from different positions?
Like I was kind of almost viewing it as, say, viewing it like a mountain. So, there was like different stages of the journey. It was even when you had the one where it was, say, past the peak, it was almost like a sadness because it was like the journey down.
Ah, okay.
Because like you'd already reached the peak, you'd finish the journey type thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's weird, huh? This is a line, and it makes you feel differently, right? And people will feel differently. Some people will, you react like that. Some people will think it's fantastic that I'm up there and I'm looking down on it and I've done it. Other people, when they look at from the bottom or they're looking up, they feel quite intimidated, right? It's weird. It's what I'm trying to say here. It's a perspective. We think of it as, oh, you've got to understand other people's perspective. It's true, but it's also literal, seeing things on different perspectives. And I don't want to take too much time on this now because we do need to have a break. But if you want to get your creative thinking going, right, before a workshop or something, look at something near, look at something far, look at something up, look at something down, look around, move, look at something in your perspective, get your pen, look at it there, look at it from this way, look at it from that way. And you are getting your brain to engage different perspectives. And it will come over into your conversations. Another thing is you can do before a meeting, draw a little, you want to be creative, draw a little arc like that. Do it. Draw 50 little arrows, and it will get your brain thinking about different perspectives. Yeah, what I'm trying to say is these are almost like hacks that you can do. You're almost hacking your biology to hack your to think differently. Let's take a break here, yeah? Unless there's any question or comment.
If I could just jump in there, it's funny. I was reading a book and it was talking about how there was a specific guy used to get musicians thinking differently. So a lot of musicians would say be very comfortable in kind of like, how a song might develop. But what he used to do is he'd come in and he'd completely tear that up. He'd get like cards that would be like a chord, and then he'd take a tree and then he'd point to the chords in like random orders, and it would really disorient like the artists and stuff like that.
Right.
But then I think it mentioned Iggy Pop and David Bowie. It was that was what kind of spawned two of the Bowie's most like successful albums, was the fact that he was able to change his musical perspective so much during working with this guy. But then it mentioned then Phil Collins tried the approach and he ended up throwing beer cans at him, so it doesn't work for everybody.
No, but thanks for sharing that example. It's exactly that. It's like you're playing with stuff quite literally in a physical way, and it change and it disrupts, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
His name was Brian Eno, I think, was the
Oh,
guy.
I know Brian Eno. Yeah. It's yeah, 8 minutes past. Let's try and be back a little bit before quarter past. Right. And I wonder how many of you are going to go and look at your phones now, and how many of you are going to stare at the sky. Anyway, just a random question. And so I'll see you in 5 minutes. And so just before quarter past, if possible. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay. I don't know if there's anybody else here, but we'll get going. Okay, there's at least these three. I mean, three non-UNDP here. I'm not meaning, you know what I mean. Anyway, we've got still quite a lot to get on to go through. So I'm going to press on, and do jump in with any comments or suggestions. Questions, the power of questions, right? I want to move on to this. And this is again, this is a little bit of this is both a practical tool but a way of thinking. Resistance to premature closure sounds very grand, right? Do you remember this? Right? Duck, rabbit. This is, you know, the standard thing. There's lots of this. Our desire for certainty means we don't like the ambiguity. It has to be either a duck or a rabbit. It can't be a duck and a rabbit. Right? We close it down. What we've done is we've closed it. We've decided what it is, and our brains go back and forward, but we've decided it's this or it's that. We've closed the issue. And that's fine, because when we need to be practical. But when we want to be innovative, actually, we want to resist closing stuff off more when we don't need to. A rainbow. How many colors of the rainbow were there? How many colors are there in a rainbow?
7.
7. 7. Okay. Are there? Well, there are 7, at least in most cultures now. But until Newton came along and did all his stuff with prisms and separating out light, there were 5. Right? People saw 5. 7 is kind of a religious number. It's quite a strong, has quite, in many religions, no Christianity, has quite strong religious connotations. He decided there were 7. Right? But actually, there's also infrared, you know, and there's prisms, which aren't included there. I understand, and actually, there are no colors in a rainbow. It's light, right? And it's reflections of the rainbow. It's the refraction, and there's no distinct colors. It's a continuous spectrum. Right? The boundaries are where we decide to draw them. Right? There's not, you know, light does not have those boundaries. The light is what we perceive in those boundaries. So even things which seem very physical, I'm not saying it's wrong that we see 7, but this is also it's the way we're seeing it, right? We've decided that there are 7. Before Newton, there were 5. I understand. I'm not sure if this is true. That in some parts of China that there are traditionally 4 colors in a rainbow. I've tried to research this and I can't come up with definitive things. In some countries that you have light blue and dark blue. In some languages, light blue it has an entirely different word. It's not light blue of that. It's seen as something completely different. Right? So we even things that we see, which we're very sure about, a lot of them are more cultural. Vision, right? Birds see more colors than humans, right? Because they just have more tones, right? So they see four. Sorry, they have four. We have three, and they see much. This is what humans see. This is what the birds see. Dogs, they see less colors than humans, right? Because they do it, but it's the same thing, but they're perceiving it differently. So what we're seeing, even at physical things, we are making judgments. And that's not bad, because in cultures we all make the same judgments and we all agree on the same things. But it's important to think about how our brains work and memory, right, in our models. If you see a tree on a computer disk, it will be stored at a specific location, a file, right? Brains don't work like that, right? You see a tree, and even if you're not aware of it, if you come from some countries, that might make you think of Christmas. I live in Germany, where forests are a big part of the culture, and Little Red Riding Hood, right? So you see a tree, and there's all these different associations. Someone in Guatemala might see trees and think of parrots, even if they're not aware of it, but those are the associations. Or somebody sees money, the green, or a tree house as a kid, and it makes them nostalgic. So we never see things as they are. We see associations of things in our models, and our models are not of things. Our models include all of these things: our emotions, goals, memories, meaning, beliefs. So whenever we are closing something off and we're saying this is this, it's not that, we are limiting possibilities. And that's fine when we need to be practical, but there are often times when we don't need to be. Right? And remember, the brain doesn't like unfinished business. That's why TV soap operas, they always end on a cliffhanger, right? To make you watch the next episode, because it's an open thing, right? That we like mysteries. We don't like unsolved mysteries. But we can use this in a very simple way. I just want to digress a little bit. There was somebody called Bluma Zeikenik, who was a psychology professor actually in Berlin at the university over 100 years ago. She was, I think, Lithuanian or Soviet, and Lithuanian as it was then. And she and her colleagues, they used to go to a beer garden every Friday afternoon after work. Beer gardens are big things in Germany. And so they'd go to a beer garden and they would all order their food, and everybody would order something separate, and they want their salad. One person doesn't want onions, one other person does. And, it can get complicated with 10 people or whatever, all ordering food. And they always had the same waiter, and their waiter always got their orders completely right, even though he never wrote them down. So he didn't write it down, but he always got it completely right. Okay? And they, being psychology professors and academics, they were like, what's going on here with this guy? How does he remember all of this stuff? He gets it right every time, but he never writes anything down. So they decided to do an experiment. And one day, just after he delivered the perfect meal again, they put a serviette or napkin over their plates and said, excuse me, could you come back and tell us what we had? He was like, no. And they were like, but you just you just served us this food like 30 seconds ago. What did we have? I have no idea. He didn't know. They're like, ah, it's interesting. What's going on here? And what do you think is going on there? How do we explain that? And he could give the perfect thing, but now he can't.
Is it to do with kind of like his short-term memory? So it's like the way it works is it kind of goes into his memory, and when it's done, it's literally just moved straight out.
He no longer needs it. Yeah. It's like, you know, when you used to revise for exams at school and or at university, and you'd revise, do the exam, and then it was gone. It was no longer it was no longer necessary. He closed the loop, right? It was no longer there. But remember, the brain doesn't like unfinished business. Here he's finished the business. Right? So the brain no longer needs to work on it. Now, imagine that we've all done this. You're in a meeting or you go to a party or something, and you meet somebody and you really can't remember their name 2 days later. Right? Who was this person? Who was this person that I was who I was talking to? I can't remember their name. Anybody have that? Yeah, you can't remember. And then 3 days later, I don't know, you're putting your socks in the washing machine, or you're sitting down to eat, or you're driving along, and suddenly it comes into your mind, Emilio, that was who it was. Right? You've had that. Your brain was still working on it. At some level, when you weren't doing something else, your brain was still working on that question, trying to resolve that uncertainty. Yeah, it's kind of going on in the background. When you keep that, in other words, whenever you close the loop, you come up with this closure, your brain is done with it. There's nothing more to explain. But when you keep the loop open, your brain will still work on it. So, for example, you know how it is sometimes as well, that you're reading a book and you're really into the book and you want to get through the book as quickly as you can, and you're so engaged, you close the book, and some books might affect your life and change you as a person, but most of the time it's finished, it's done. And so one way you can keep the loop open is actually to read a book very, very slowly over a course of a year, right? Which means that you will always be thinking about it slowly and letting it sink and letting it go deep. The way to use this with innovation is that we always want to come up with answers, right? We have to be practical. People want decisions. How do we do this? Give me 5 ideas, right? Some things do not have easy answers. They don't, and you're going to be asking the same question for a lifetime. How do I have more impact? How do I live my values more? These are not simple questions. They're not just a to-do list, right? And as soon as you've closed it off and you've come up, I need to do this, this, and this, and this, it's good. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't be practical, but if you do that, you've closed off other possibilities, right? You've closed stuff down. And so one of the key things here is to sometimes don't put the pressure on you to try to answer something. Trust yourself, the living organism, right? The living organism, the whole you, to still be working on something. Let it settle. Don't put pressure. And you might find yourself, the answer might come tomorrow. It might never come. And if you're asking yourself, how can I live my values more? You might never get an answer, but you might find out that just by asking your brain that question, that your brain, you actually end up automatically living your values more? How can I have more impact? How can I listen to communities more in agriculture? How can I listen more? Just by asking yourself the question, you might not get the answer, but you'll probably find your brain will automatically start answering it. You will just be listening more because that's where your attention will go. So this just relaxing a little bit and sometimes just letting the questions settle is better often when you don't have a time pressure. If you don't have a time pressure, don't push yourself always to answer questions, because as soon as you answer the question, you've cut off the other possibilities. I was going to do a little exercise on this, but we don't have the time for it. Right? So I want to move on to something else. But, well, actually, we're going to do it very quickly. Very quickly. I want to ask you, just so you get a sense of what this is like. It's counter to our being. It's counter to the way we are to not answer the questions. It's difficult to not answer questions, right? I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to ask you some questions now, and resist answering them. Don't even think about them. Just let the question sink. And you can ask yourself the question again if you want, but do not try to answer them. Resist answering the question, just to get an idea as to what it feels like. All right? You ready? Just let the question sink. Don't answer it. What can you do to have a fantastic day today? What can you do to enjoy this moment here and now even more? What can you do to learn something profound about yourself? What can you do to be more innovative? What can you do to have more impact in the world? What can you do to broaden your horizons and discover new levels of creativity within yourself? What can you do to have more of a connection with nature? What can you do to understand and feel yourself as a complete living organism? What can you do to live the life that you want to live and help other people to live the life that they want to live? Yeah, it's not a to-do list, the answers. These are like questions that don't necessarily have a quick answer. And if you leave the questions open just by asking the question, you're already getting your brain to work on it, just like you're trying to remember it was Emilio who was who you met at the party. You know? And it also takes pressure off you. Yeah. And again, I want to emphasize again, it's not saying don't be practical, just ask yourself questions, but don't look for the answer always, because the answer can come in. You have to trust yourself that there's more going on inside you and that you'll come to the answers in different ways. You need to trust yourself here. And with that, and if there's no, just jump in if there's any questions. It's like you've got an internal search engine, right? You got all of these experiences, etc., and just trust yourself to ask the questions. And it might take a while sometimes for if they're deep questions to come up with the answers. But this is key to innovation. It's not just about coming up with ideas, brainstorming. You know, got to count 10 things we can do, creativity. That's important, but there's a deeper level about how to, in terms of being more creative in terms of a mindset over time. This is really important, giving yourself permission. Does anybody here live in a country or has lived in a country where there's censorship? Censorship, yeah. What does the censor want more than anything else? And what's their highest form of censorship? You know, when they've really won.
So like when you don't question it, it's like
Right. People are already it's self-censorship. Fear, absolutely. Right? And you're already self-censoring. Exactly. Suppress the thought themselves. This is what it's after. Right? You don't even need to censor because people are already internalized what they can think and what they can say. Right? Then they've won, whoever they are. Right? Now we are, from the moment we're born to the day we die, we are given suggestions by other people as to what is right to think, what's good, what's bad, what we should say, what we shouldn't say, how we should react to something, how we shouldn't react. From our parents, cry, don't cry, play with this, don't play with that. Oh, you shouldn't complain about this, or you should complain about that. We have this from our parents, from our friends at school, from our teachers, from politicians, from our religious leaders, from our bosses at work, from our colleagues, from our families, from our friends, from newspapers, from marketers. Right? We're constantly being bombarded with this is how you should think. Right? And it's not all bad. I don't mean it's bad. This is called culture as well. This is about social norms. It allows us to live together. Right? I mean, it allows us to develop common meanings. There's a lot of good things about this. But it also, in terms of innovation and creativity and the deep kind of thinking about yourself and how you can have more deep creativity, self-censorship is a big problem. Right? And when you say can do something, in English and in many other languages, the word can has two meanings. It means able to, meaning do you have the skills, the ability to do something? And then the other meaning is, do you have the permission to do it? Am I allowed to do it? But we use them as if they're the same thing, and they're very different meanings. Right? And people, if you listen to people, they mix the two things up and they say, oh, I can't do this because of whatever. Well, you can. You've got a choice. I don't know. I can't go on holiday. I can't, just leave my job and go on holiday for a year. Well, I can, right? In terms of, I physically can, right? I mean, it's not that I have a choice. Doesn't mean it's a good thing to do, but I can, right? And there's this notion that's maybe not a good example. um, it's about giving yourself permission to experience whatever you experience in the world and to recognize your experience without having it interpreted by other people. and this is the key to innovation, right? That you are free, meaning doesn't mean that you're able to do it or you can't, that you have the abilities or the skills or the financial resources to do it, but in terms of the permission, right? In terms of you're allowed to do it, there's nobody stopping you, the living organism, from doing this. We limit ourselves constantly, and this is the enemy of new thinking. It's the fundamental thing which stops us and keeps us in this box. So I want to give you an example of this so you understand what I mean. I'm going to say a few sentences, and you don't have to think about it. You can if you want, but just take them on board. You, meaning you, the living organism, not just you, the identity. You, everything, the thing, everything contained within your skin. You are free, meaning you're allowed to. You don't need to ask anybody's permission. Doesn't mean you can, but you don't have to ask anybody's permission. You are free, you, the living organism, to find today the best day of your life. There's nobody stopping you. I'm not saying that you can, but there's nobody stopping you finding today the best day of your life. Not because of what you're doing, but just your reaction to life itself. You are free to pay much more attention to people who are important in your life. You are free to connect much more fully with your natural creativity and innovation. You are free to fully embrace your experiences and trust yourself. Doesn't mean you can, but you don't need to ask anybody's permission. Nobody's stopping you from doing it. It's only you. Think of something you don't like doing at work, maybe writing a report. You are free to love writing reports. Doesn't mean you can or you know how to do it, but you are free to do that. You, the living organism, are free to love writing reports. There's nobody's permission you have to ask to actually enjoy it. You are free to become much more innovative in all aspects of your life, personal, professional. You are free to make a decision of something you're going to pursue. You are free, meaning you don't need to ask anybody's permission, to take that idea you've been thinking about for years and put it into practice. Yeah? You don't need to ask anybody's permission. You are free to learn something really important about yourself, about how you can bring new ideas. And you are free to find ways of having much, much, much more impact in food systems. Okay? You feel it, huh? I mean, it's important. I think you all kind of, I guess, I'm assuming that you kind of know what I mean by this. Right? It's I'm not one of these people who's like, yeah, you just need to believe on it and do it. It's not quite as simple as that. I'm not, yeah, you've got to, yeah, the sky. I don't, everybody's got to self-actualize and whatever. I'm not saying that. Right? It's not some Yahoo kind of just think positive. It's not. I'm really not trying to say that. I'm trying to say that you are free. You can choose not to have more impact as well. You can choose not to have a good day. Right? It's about choice. Right? You can choose to hate writing reports, or you can choose to like writing reports. You can choose to hate spinach or like spinach. Right? But again, when you're making these closures, saying I hate reports or I hate spinach, you're closing off other alternatives, right? And you are free to have other alternatives, as in you, the living organism. Okay, but it's really not just about, well, think positive, this kind of thing. I hope it goes beyond that. You're free to be pissed off, all right, with the world, and you're free not to be, right? It's like you're free to just to have your experience about it. Again, it's both an idea, but it's also a tool that you can really just. If you're one of the problems is when you're trying to make these kind of statements, there's often a part of your brain which is going, I'm free to, I don't know, I'm free to be more innovative. And there's a part of your brain going, no, you're not, because you're not very creative, right? There's that arguing kind of thing. If you're saying like, I am creative, and your brain goes, no, you're not, you're boring or whatever. When you're saying here, what we're saying here is you're not giving your brain anything to argue with. Because you're not saying you can be more creative. What you're saying is you are free to be more creative, meaning you, the living organism. And so you're not giving your brain anything to argue against. It's a statement of fact. Right? You're not saying I am more creative or I can be more creative. All you're saying is I am free to be, which you are. Right? And so you're not, it's really important, this stuff, not to give your brain to phrase these kind of things in ways that you're not just trying to lie to yourself, but you're stating a fact. But look, I know I need to move. Oh, no, we don't have time for your own personal advisor. But anyway, we don't know. Let's go on to this. Get back to your mum was right. Sleep on it. A heart of creativity. Sleep. Who doesn't sleep enough? Anybody? Doesn't really get in there 7 to 9 hours? Doesn't matter, but you should try to. It's kind of important. We spend about a third of our lives asleep. Right? And it's got to be doing something. Imagine a third of biological life asleep, which can be all these predators which can get you. It's got to be doing something. So Japanese women have the longest life expectancy. So she'll sleep nearly 29 years of her life. And we dream up to 2 hours a night. And we didn't used to think that, but it's understood that, which means that she will spend more than 7 years of her life dreaming, right? In a world of make-believe where people do certain things, of delusions, of schizophrenia, of psychotic kind of behavior of things, which you then forget about immediately, next morning, amnesia. She'll spend 7 years in a kind of like in a realm of madness almost. So will you. And in dreaming, it's understood, particularly within this model of predictive processing within these models, that actually what the dreaming is doing is there's a lot of modern research into dreaming, is it's actually trying to, it's trying to close uncertainty through dreams. It's trying out scenarios, right? It's trying to rearrange. It's trying to rearrange knowledge and information to make it fit with the model or to change the model. And anyway, it's a fascinating area, but we can't get into that. And we learn during dreams. I mean, during sleep. That's actually when you learn, right? Is that in the night? And there's all sorts of areas during dreams where information comes together and people get insights and dreams. Periodic table, right? A lot of science stuff, atoms. And it's not that these are revelations, you know, that there's some kind of mystical, the universe comes in a dream. It's a time when memories get reshaped and information in the brain gets focused together. There's really lots of different areas of where people they report that of dreams were really important in terms of their creative innovation stuff. We can't get into this. We don't have much time. And my favorite one is this. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. He used to take a tape recorder on tour and sleep with a guitar in his bed by his bed. And he would and one morning he woke up and saw on his tape recorder, remember those days, that the tape had recorded something, and he didn't remember it. He pressed play, and it was like the riff for "I Can't Get No Satisfaction," you know. He heard that, and he'd woken up in the middle of the night, and it'd come to him, and he'd done that. And he said he heard that followed by like 2 hours of snoring, right? But anyway, but that's so the brain it's active in sleep. Anyway, very briefly, sleep cycle and transitions. Right, sleep is important. We could do a whole workshop just on sleep. Right, it's fascinating. When you go, you're not always just awake or asleep or awake or asleep. There's a transition period. All right, in both when you go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning. And these transition periods are when you're awake and you're conscious of the world, and between where you go into this dream kind of state of unconsciousness. Right, where reality meets weirdness, right? And these have names even. This is called hypnagogia. This is hypnopompia, right? These things when you're falling asleep, right? You can notice it. If it's not actually very difficult. You can pay attention to it. Your dreams, your thoughts start getting a bit weird just before you go to sleep. Right? What's that got to do with anything? We're coming back to here. We're closing the loop with Einstein. Sorry, Edison. This ball, right? And Salvador Dali also used it. He used this ball in hypnagogia. What they did was every day he would sit on a chair with the balls on his hand, right? And two metal plates. And he would think about something and then start falling asleep, going into this hypnagogia stage, right? And then let the balls, and then as he fell asleep, his hands would open, the balls would drop, and he'd wake up, and he would write down what he was thinking about. Right? And there's actually quite a lot. Dali did this. There are others. And there's actually and I thought this was bullshit, basically, or an urban myth, right? It sounded a bit too whatever. So I apparently spent 3 hours a day doing this, right? This guy who said it's innovation is 99% perspiration, 1% innovation does this. I thought it was nonsense, so I actually did contact the Edison Foundation to look in their files to see if it was actually true. Right? It just sounded like urban myth to me, and apparently it is. Right? It's a little bit more complicated than this. Okay, and he didn't let people know about this. Right? He went totally against his rational scientific kind of thing. But anyway, it's a very simple. It's a complex thing. If anybody in a very, 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 very short period of time. Anybody want to give it a go? Shall we try it? We won't go to sleep, but just to give you a taste of what this might feel like. What I want you to do is take a piece of paper, and if anybody, we might end up going a little bit beyond the hour, okay? And please, if anybody, I apologize for this, but I just want to, if anybody needs to go, then please go, but we might end up going like just a few minutes longer, okay? Take a piece of paper and write down an area where you would like to be more innovative, or a problem you're facing, or something. Something that you'd like to get some new insights on. Doesn't need to be a long essay, but just stare at it, just look at it and really bring it to mind what this issue is. And now I'd like you to sit back, and I'm going to ask you to turn off your cameras. I'm sorry, to close your eyes, but please feel free to turn off your camera if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes while your camera's still on. All right, that's totally understandable. I'm going to turn off my Now you've got your thing. Please close your eyes. Just sit back and just bring this issue to mind. Think about it a little bit. And then just relax a lot more. Just feel yourself almost drifting down a bit, going a bit deeper. And think about the issue. What are you trying to understand? What new insights do you have? And just allow yourself to drift and float away, going deeper down. It's funny how you can sleep so easily. And think about the issue, just bring it to mind, ideas. Maybe remember a dream you've had recently. And that sweet, relaxing feeling of being asleep and dreams and different worlds. And think about the issue, looking at it from different perspectives, down and above, and the different meanings and the different possibilities there. Just allow yourself to sleep some more, going down and down. Remember a dream you've had. It might be a bit confusing, thinking about the dream and the issue and sleeping. Just allow yourself just to relax even more, aware of your feet, your body. Notice new things. And think about the issue. And remember a dream you've had. Think about the issue and remember a dream. And now open your eyes, come back, and just write down anything that you want about this issue. Open your eyes, get out that piece of paper and just write down anything that comes to mind. And when you've written anything down, any thoughts, just please turn on your camera and come back I won't ask you to share what if anybody, what if anything you've written, right? But and we did this. This was in like 3 minutes. We did this. This is not very systematic, and I probably shouldn't have done this in 3 minutes. It's a bit too quick. But this can you get the idea, right? It's this thinking about stuff, but not thinking, letting yourself drift and go and think about other things and coming back to the issue in a very relaxed way. It can really bring in new insights, right? And somebody like Edison did it systematically every day, right? And I know that we only do this for 3 minutes, and it's just a little thing, but just as a teaser for you to try this out, because you can get a lot of stuff from in this kind of state. With that, we've come to the end. And if you've got any questions, we could maybe we could, if anybody's got time, just stay for an extra just 5 minutes if anybody has any questions or comments or whatever. But and if you can't stay, you've got something else. Apologies for my timing. But I just want to hand over to Alexandra quickly, because just to catch people before anybody has to go.
Thank you, Ben. And basically, very quickly, we wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this event. So it's not the first time that I joined those workshops. And as I mentioned, I think last week, each time I discover something new. But it's true that we had a limited time in terms of going through the content. So as Ben mentioned, this is just an introduction. And we would love you to give us some feedback about the event. So you will see that once the session is over, you will see an automatic Zoom survey that will appear. So we encourage you to, yes, share your insights, because that will be useful to plan for future events and activities, and also coaching programs, because Ben, for instance, has offered last year to the members of our community a series of coaching, one-on-one coaching sessions. So I will stop here. Also, I want to thank Camila for helping us organize the event. And for those of you who could stay longer, and if you have any comments or questions that you would like to ask Ben now straight away, please feel free to stay. For those of you who have to leave, I wish you a great rest of your day, afternoon, and yes, let's stay in touch. Please visit us on our platform, or you can also contact directly Ben if you prefer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexandra. And the evaluation is important, because the money is limited, and UNDP needs to know, is this something to invest in or not? If it's not, then you should say that. If it is, say it. Say either way clearly, but UNDP needs to get feedback, because this is one way or the other, whether or not you find it valuable. So please do use that opportunity. Any comments, questions?